for fun. Good afternoon-ish, a couple minutes past at least. Welcome to the February general meeting, full general meeting of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Can I just, who is running the Zoom? Is there anybody else on?
Anna? I told you.
Just so we can see faces. Or at least the attendees. There are 19 folks. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we definitely have quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. We will, we're actually checking folks in attendance-wise as we find you, so we're not going to do a full round of attendance. We've got great stuff on the agenda. Today we have a handful of votes that we need to make just to update some bylaws and do some procedural pieces, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about the coordinated entry assessment prioritization survey that was done, as well as the governor's emergency declaration. So a lot of information coming down very quickly about those two things. We want to make sure we save time for the bulk of the conversation to get an update from staff on how that is all rolling out so far and what we all might need to know about. So before we go any further, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Linn County is located on Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional indigenous homeland of the Kalapuya people. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed from the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. Today, Kalapuya descendants are primarily citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and they continue to make important contributions to their communities, to Oregon, and to the world. All right, we have a handful of minutes set aside for public comment. Is there any public comment in the room or on Zoom? So if you can raise your hand or indicate in the chat, that would be really helpful. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. So if we can get a motion to approve the consent items, they are the minutes from the last all-member board meeting and the statement, financial dashboard, and financials.
I'll move approval.
Great. Move, is there a second? Second. Okay, all voting members, those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand on the Zoom.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. Okay, moving right along. We want to do a vote on the Poverty and Homeless Board Charter amendments. I don't know if there's someone assigned to give an overview, Kate, of what those are, or you want to go ahead and...
Do you want to start and share the reasoning?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, everybody, for this item. As the original requester for us to consider a new style of leadership, I just wanted to give a couple explanations about why we went to do it. As this body has found its identity and done such great work, there's often been a charge that we only serve homelessness or we only serve housing items, and by having two chairs, we felt, two vice chairs, we felt that we could take and keep attention to both sides of the projects to make sure that we are having complete recognition of our scope of work. And so it was a trial run under my chair, and I wanted to see if this body would be interested in continuing it on. Madam Chair.
Excellent. So it's a formal adoption of that amendment to the bylaws, or to the charter amendments that would allow us to have that. So unless there's any other questions.
And the track changes on the charter are all made in order to adopt having that two vice chair role. And so those are the reasons for the changes that are proposed.
All right, we'll entertain a motion if someone,
I move to adopt the amendment to the charter.
Second.
excellent. Motion and a second. Any discussion, additional discussion? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful. All right, so we are going to get a little bit of an update for another vote on some proposed policy changes. We have both the coordinated entry lateral transfer policy that we're going to hear a little bit about, and the PHB member lived expertise of homelessness stipend policy. So I'm going to turn it over to, I assume, James first.
Everybody. So looking at page 21 of the packet, the Coordinated Entry Stakeholder Committee has done a lot of work to create a lateral transfer policy, and I recognize there's some technical language that's in here, so happy to answer any questions. But ultimately, we are looking to create a policy to allow for households that are enrolled in rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing programs to either lateral transfer, so if they're in one PSH program, they could transfer to another PSH program, similarly, rapid rehousing to rapid rehousing, or transfer from a rapid rehousing project to a permanent supportive housing project. There's not currently a formal policy for that. Again, recognize there's some technical language in here. Happy to answer any questions, but ultimately looking for the board to vote on adopting this. And just FYI, in addition to the Coordinated Entry Stakeholder Committee, we had meetings with rapid rehousing providers, PSH providers, and then members of League also participated in reviewing this policy.
Do you think for the folks who might be watching who aren't as familiar, you could just give a high-level reason? What are the challenges we are facing that indicated why we should be making this policy change?
Sure. So there's a couple things. So if we use MLK as an example, if someone is enrolled at MLK Commons, a PSH project, and for whatever reason are being exited from that project, if they exit directly to homelessness, they actually lose their chronically homeless designation per kind of the HUD technicalities because they were housed that whole time. If we can laterally transfer them before they're exited, they maintain that chronic status and would maintain the prioritization under coordinated entry, so we could keep them from exiting to homelessness and could transfer them to a project. And then the other common situation that comes up is someone's enrolled in the rapid rehousing project and their needs are not fully identified prior to them entering that program, and it turns out that a PSH project is really the support that they need. So those are the two kind of most common situations that come up.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments?
I'd like to say I'm in strong support of this as it helps keep permanent supportive housing permanent. The folks who lose their status because they tried or went through the process to get into this, we don't want to throw away that type of work. And so also some of our camps and other shelter bodies are starting to work on what's called lateral transfers, because this is the future, make sure we don't lose track of our people. So thank you so much for the committee to frame this work.
Any other questions or comments? Hopefully if someone's monitoring Zoom, you'll be able to, okay, thank you. All right, if none, we can go ahead and entertain a motion. We'll do each of these separately, just in case there's additional questions on the second one. So can I get a motion to approve this coordinated entry lateral transfer policy?
I so move.
So moved.
I'll second. How about that?
Excellent. Do we know, could we see who that was that?
B. Richard Self.
Thank you. All right.
Richard is a member. in the
Oh,
PHB.
Richard isn't, oh, okay.
Okay, so
We'll note your support though, Richard.
I move.
So Mayor Finnis
All right.
moved.
Well, I'm a member of the Poverty and Homeless Board, so I thought I was somebody.
And I will second.
Okay.
So we have a second from Councilor Fleck.
Okay, Counselor Fleck got a second. We'll circle back around to that, Richard, and give
touch
some
base.
clarification. Okay. All right, all those, or further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful, that passes. Thank you. All right, and are you on board for the second piece too, or is Amanda gonna jump in? Excellent.
All right. Hello, Amanda Borda, Senior Program Services Coordinator with Lane County. And I'm just here to go over a quick league stipend policy that we're proposing for approval today. I'm not sure if we brought this to this larger group, but it's something that we've been discussing within League and within Lane County for quite some time. You all might know that we do provide, or have in the past provided, some level of stipend for the members of this body who have lived experience of homelessness. But as our sort of lived experience advisory group grows, we really recognize the need to provide some kind of compensation or stipend for everyone who brings that expertise to the table. This is a sort of recognized best practice across the country. A lot of COCs are offering some level of stipend to a lived experience advisory body. We had previously not been able to identify a funding source to sort of support that ongoing, so we've been working over the last several years to try to do that. So what you have in your packet is sort of a summary of that policy that we're proposing to start providing stipends to ongoing members of League who are participating in our continuum of care. And the way we've set it up is sort of a monthly stipend of $75, or in lieu of that, they could take a $50 bus pass, or what would be the equivalent of $50. That was based on some feedback from League members who may or may not want to have a monetary stipend if it affects their benefits or income levels or for other reasons. And so we wanted to offer two different options. We hope to explore additional options in the future, but based on funding sources, we're restricted to sort of specific types of compensation for the moment. So essentially what it says is that if you're a member of League and participating in the continuum of care and have attended, meetings ongoing, so as long as they attend a meeting in the previous month, they'll receive a stipend for that month. So we won't be tracking it on sort of an individual hourly basis or individual meeting basis. This is more just administratively friendly for us to provide just a monthly stipend if they're an active sort of member. And so we'll just be asking folks to complete an enrollment form to sort of enroll, and then they would either opt out at some point if they don't want to receive it, or they could, if they sort of drop off and haven't attended a meeting in several months, we would drop them off and they'd have to re-enroll to receive stipends again. So I'm happy to answer any quick questions. Otherwise,
How many people are you thinking are going to?
sure. So we've actually added 3 additional members over the last couple of months to League. We've been doing some active recruiting, so I think we have about 8 current full-time League members at this point. We do hope to add maybe a couple more this year. And some of them could choose not to. We had mixed interest of the current membership, but we think it'll be beneficial to sort of recruit additional members too, especially those who have recent or current experience of homelessness.
What's your funding source?
Kate, do you have information on the funding source that we've identified?
So we're just using our most flexible funds that we have in the county in order to provide a few options.
How many League meetings are there?
League currently meets monthly, so they meet the first Friday of every month. Sometimes members participate in other committees as well.
They also take part in some of our COC support work as well, and so that's overall, thank you. I would just like to say, as one of the founding members of League, that this is not only just helping be a thank you for their service, but also helps folks who may need to pay for childcare to come to our meetings, to be able to cover the parking downtown to come to our meetings. And so we want to make sure that this is a supported effort, and having attended meetings on this topic about supporting lived experience, this is very supportive of our goals. So thank you, Amanda, for bringing this forward.
I'll say, just as a community member who we're hosting conversations all the time and inviting folks with lived experience, and we were kind of wondering what a good rate. So it's nice too for the county to set this as a policy, and then other folks can look to them as best practice. So.
And I will say too, this is sort of a place to start. And so if we find we need to adjust the amount or adjust the format of stipends, we can revisit that with League.
Yeah.
Just understanding the most flexible funding source, what are we anticipating an annual budget for this to be? A fairly low dollar amount?
We set aside $10,000, and the first year, of course, will be a good predictor of what we would need to set aside into the future. We're really hoping to, offer it to whomever has that lived expertise within the PHB too. And so, really looking to spend that money if it does mean that we have greater engagement of folks with that lived expertise.
All right, any further questions? Yeah, Jacob.
Oh, hey, everybody. I just want to applaud the decision on this, and I appreciated Amanda's comment about needing to adjust it. I would say that $75 for the hours of engagement that I know some league members give seems a little low to me, so I'm not suggesting a change in the recommendation because I do applaud it, but I want us to be open to adjusting the amount upwards to support engagement with people that have lived experience. So thanks.
If I may, just a point of reference, for people with lived experience on the PHB, it was $10 a meeting at one point. And so 75 is a step forward in the right direction. So.
Yeah.
But that's not to detract from what Mr. Fox was speaking to.
Absolutely. All right, if there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a vote for this policy as well. Any motion? All right, Matthias motions. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Venus? All right, all those in favor of,
I'm sorry, Chair, can we have a little bit of discussion before the?
oh, I'm sorry, yes, discussion, go for it.
I just think I appreciate the information that's been presented, and I'll vote in favor of it. I do want to just make a comment that as a member of county government, and the most flexible funds in county are obviously the ones that everybody really desires for their budget. This is a low dollar amount. I'm going to vote yes today, but I hope that we'll continue to investigate maybe alternate funding, and then also as we talk about whether additional dollars need to be allocated to it, at some point that has to be part of the calculation, but I just felt like I needed to make a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fair, thank you. Any other discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I would echo the same concerns. I'm both a provider and a city councilor, and so I know that several of the providers came to the HSC last year explaining that the revenue that we're getting is not enough to sustain our services. So while this is a small amount, I certainly support it. I also am a little concerned about future funding for our program, so I just wanted to kind of echo that comment.
And I can also offer that one of the reasons that we've chosen this funding source initially is to just have a better understanding of what needs to be allocated in the future. And we do hope to be able to move it over to the continuum of care planning dollars that are received once we have that better understanding and are moving into a new fiscal year. So I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion. With the YHDP, the Youth Homeless Demonstration Grant, we built it in. But still, like, not knowing is really hard to build that into a grant if you have really restrictive timelines. So I think it's probably the best move to start.
I would also like to share that we are working with new partnerships in our community that are looking at what does lived experience mean and how do we integrate it into our decision making. So we have CCOs, we have other state agencies. This could even be part of the admin considerations because we are doing it with informed expertise. And so let's look at how do we repackage this, because we've known for a long time 10% is not good enough for admin cost. 15, 20% when we're actually having the experts at the table. These are the types of things I think that as a lived experience voice, we should consider. Fiscal responsibility, fiscal preservative efforts, all are important, but also if we're building without that experience, we're gonna spend more in the cleanup and the aftermath.
Any other discussion?
I just want to echo what you just said. Absolutely. Everybody is requiring expertise at the table. We need to provide funding and we need to provide different ways to look at it. 10% admin is absolutely unattainable and unsustainable. So I echo.
Thanks, Julie. Richard?
Thank you. First of all, as of Valentine's Day, I've been housed now for 5 years. Saying that, I wanted to say that the stipend is fine, but some of us are attached to services like food stamps, Social Security and Homes for Good. And in that light, any change to our income in any way, shape, or form can have a detrimental effect to any of those programs. In that light, I would suggest that there be a option for something like a bus pass or something like that. I yield.
Yeah, and this policy as of now does include either the option for a bus pass or for that $75 stipend. So I appreciate that, Richard. Sounds like that was good feedback that they took.
Yeah, that was feedback from Richard and other members of League, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, wonderful. Okay, we have one more vote here. We have some new committee members that are being added to the Coordinated Entry System Committee.
We did. This is actually a short update. Mia unfortunately had to decline participation in the committee, so we're going to be reopening the application period for our youth with lived experience position. So.
Okay, so one position open for youth with lived experience.
Yes, it's not officially open yet. We just found out, but yeah, it'll be coming open within the next week or so. So there's not actually anyone to vote currently on.
All right, thanks. Okay, we're gonna do a quick round of committee updates, and then we will get into the bulk of the meeting. So, Catherine, I don't know if you have a brief committee update or if you're holding it for the following piece of the presentation.
No, I think we can just wait and we'll come back around.
Okay, excellent. All right, healthcare, Dr. Willie Foster.
Yep, we're having a retreat in March, like a 4-hour session, because it seems in an hour it's hard to get much stuff done. So we're planning to do a 4-hour session in March, and we're excited about that. I've identified some things. I think our biggest thing is still trying to get what I call that mid-level of medical respite. Still working on that. It's just been a slow project. We have places where people that are really sick can go, nursing homes. We have the pallet program, but there's this mid-level that we've struggled to find.
Can you explain what level of service they need at that mid-level?
Well, I mean, at the palace, they need to be totally independent of all activities of daily living. And then there's the nursing home beds that Peace Health is reserved in. You know, the mid-level, we're trying to keep it vague so it doesn't fall under healthcare regulations, which then becomes a nightmare. But just having maybe a community health worker there full-time to remind people to take their meds. They might need some assistance getting from their wheelchair into bed. So not nursing home level of care, but they're failing at the pallets, you know. So that's what we're hoping to get from a combination of funding from Peace Health, that's been slow, and then hopefully from the two, you know, from Pacific Source and Trillium as well. So it's been a slow process.
Thank you for that. Is Julie on for a league update?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, I'm Julie. I'm the league chair. And recently we were working on House Bill 2367, the Right to Rest Act. And we had the Western Regional Advocacy Project come in and do a presentation, and it looks like we'll be working closely with them in the near future. And also, we have a new member, so that would be our update.
All right. Susan, for youth homelessness.
Yeah. So happy to report that all of our YHDP projects are now up and running as of the beginning of the year. So we have all of those services now started, the expansion of services. And so now we're kind of moving to that next phase. We've got everything started and really looking at the continued collaboration between all those new services and whether or not, what kinds of supports those are going to need moving forward. So we'll be sending out, like we always do, information about the new programs and services and requests for you all to help with connections. I know like our host home program is kind of looking for host homes that are willing to facilitate and host youth in their homes. So as we continue to help support those projects, we'll be definitely bringing you guys all on board with us. And I will try not to say any more so Matthias has an update.
Updates for the Youth Executive Committee is just right now, we're still looking for the committee. So if you guys have anyone you might have, shoot it to me or Kirsten. I think we have one potential person, so.
What is the age youth goes up to?
Have we had a presentation on the host home program yet for the youth?
No.
It could be interesting to kind of learn a little bit more about that program. I was fascinated to learn more about it. Might help generate people's interest in it. Excellent. Okay, any other questions for the different committees? Great, okay, well, we will jump right into presentation from, looks like Catherine, are you on point for that presentation still?
Yes, yeah, and James is gonna help when I mess things up or if people have questions. So, and this I think is gonna, be sort of pretty high level, but it felt important because I think in the coming months there's gonna be more, sort of recommendations and requests coming to the PHB. So doing a little of that ground setting and background, so folks have a sense of where we've been, where we're coming from, and kind of how we got to what is going to ultimately come to you. So the primary piece that we're working on right now is looking at how we are going to update our prioritization in terms of who is getting for connecting folks to resources. And then we will revisit and sort of work on creating an assessment that matches to that prioritization, right? That kind of filters folks out based on what that prioritization looks like. So that's where we are. One of the primary reasons that kind of this committee is looking at this and been tasked with it, there's actually two pieces that we're kind of trying to bring together into one space in this new proposal. So one is the equity issues around the SPDAT tool, which is what Lane County has been using for several years as that assessment and therefore prioritization. There has, in the last number of years, has been a lot of information that has come out around kind of the results of using that as the assessment, resulting in particular, BIPOC folks not getting kind of appropriately prioritized for housing resources. So most, the organization actually that created it has stopped updating it. They've acknowledged this. And so there are communities across the country that are in sort of the same situation we are in terms of trying to figure out where to go from here. So that's kind of one piece. The other piece that we're trying to then fold in is the Built for Zero model around focusing on specific subpopulations sort of within a broader population and working towards functional zero with that group, and then moving on to sort of another subpopulation doing the same sort of thing. So recognizing that we have far, far more folks than we have resources available for. And so being able to narrow and zoom in a little bit and then be able to work through different groups. So it's something that will change over time. It won't stay the same. So those are the two, I would say, kind of organizing principles that we're going into all of this with. And we had, towards the end of last year, had a survey that was shared out sort of into the broader community around prioritization, specifically looking at kind of that subpopulation piece and asking folks to rank for households, adult-only households, and then households with children. And so that information has been shared, kind of brought into the committee. And we actually ended up meeting this morning, just calendar-wise, and starting to talk through kind of how do we combine that information with some of the pieces that are, kind of reflected in the SPDAT in terms of, people's physical health or mental health or justice involvement, right? Sort of all of those things that we know that contribute to someone's sort of ability to access housing. And then also recognizing that chronic homelessness at this point is a HUD requirement for that prioritization. So we're looking at how are all those things going to fit together, and what are we going to do with them? And then, like I said, sort of once we get that sort of feels like it's in a solid place, then we'll be going to the assessment part and kind of designing the assessment process to match up with that, and anticipating that it's sort of that full package of those things together is likely what we'll be bringing back to this group to consider adopting. And I think one of the pieces that is part of the Built for Zero model that I mentioned, and is also just part of the broader approach that we're taking with this that I think is very different from how we have operated, is actually building into the process sort of this continued and periodic revisiting. So being able to look at data to understand who's being prioritized, how are those referrals happening? Are there changes we need to make? Is the assessment that we've created, resulting in the prioritization outcomes that we wanted it to? And then again, that specific subpopulation, the intention is that will shift over time. So it's exciting to be very close to the place where it's like, okay, we're going to make updates. We're going to kind of, version up the system overall, and then recognizing that the structure of it moving forward is also going to look different in terms of doing this regular revisiting, regular checking in, adapting, and changing as we go. So I think that's what kind of feels like it's important to share at this point. Happy to answer questions, or if there's anything in particular that folks are interested in hearing about.
What's the most important thing that you've pulled from these results? Like, where do we need to focus tomorrow?
I don't know that we have an answer for that in the information that we have right now. That kind of wasn't necessarily the intention of the information that we were trying to gather. Yeah. So I think that what will end up coming to the PHB, particularly in that sort of specific population prioritization piece, will be, a group or a couple of different groups that feel like, sort of the closest to a good starting point. It doesn't mean that it's the right one or the group that everyone is going to feel like is the most important group. And so again, I think that's why it's like recognizing that it's a starting place and it's going to shift and change and evolve from there along the way. Sorry, that's a not answer, I know.
Thank you for all your hard work on this.
Are there other tools beside the SPDAT, I probably got it wrong because I don't live in that sphere, that you're looking at, that are better? I mean, not just that you would develop, but have been developed at a national level?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at this, and then James knows way more about this than I do. But there has not been at this point another tool that has sort of been disseminated in the same way. There are different communities who have, it sounds like for the most common thing is folks are taking the questions that are on the SPDAT, which you got right, and making adjustments, making additions. So kind of taking it and modifying it. But there has not been a lot of really open sharing so far of those. I think because folks are a little nervous about something that they have taken and designed and maybe haven't had a lot of time with implementing yet to know sort of what the pitfalls and shortfalls might be. So there's a lot of shared learning that's happening and conversation, but no clear alternate pathway at this point.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Hi, thank you. So could you clarify or elaborate on a little bit the difference in your considerations for the singles and the families with children?
Yeah. So that was one of the things that we sort of came to in this, was recognizing that there maybe / likely are different considerations for those different populations. So I think it is based on sort of the feedback through the survey and the conversation so far. I think it's possible to likely that we'll end up having kind of different prioritization factors or considerations for those two different groups.
And if I may ask, and so there are subgroups within those groups, presumably. And then when you're talking about prioritization, you're talking about once this entry system is established, it's who rises to the top for services first. But
yes.
But as you're looking at these different populations, are you also saying, when we did the TAC report, we found that we had a higher number of single adults than was typical in other community of care regions. So are you also saying, would there be a prioritization across those larger subgroups as well?
So there's this sort of artificial but also real distinction in this conversation that on the committee we had to kind of get to and make for ourselves between like you said, who is sort of being prioritized to access services and what are the resources that are available to match them to. And we're focusing on what is the prioritization for sort of who gets matched. And that's sort of a next step after the assessment part is looking at how that matching process happens. But the resources that we have available through our rapid rehousing, this is primarily almost exclusively rapid rehousing and permanent supported housing programs, sort of have defined populations that they serve. And so that is a bit of a separate conversation in terms of, as there are new HUD dollars available, what populations are we proposing to serve with those dollars? So we're really focusing in on who are we prioritizing to get connected to the existing resources.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your question, Chris, just regarding, who are we looking to prioritize tomorrow? And I think one of the key pieces to always keep at the center of this process is that the folks who identify as BIPOC have been disproportionately affected by the tool that we've been using. And so the primary focus of changing the assessment is to really make sure that our BIPOC neighbors who are experiencing houselessness are no longer experiencing the disproportionality. And so that's the primary focus. And then looking at the subpopulations is a secondary and important focus as well.
That's
great. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, in more context here, the coordinated entry group understands that we have more single adults than pretty much everything else as far as the homeless population, but then you have to break that down so you know who you're prioritizing. So how many, for example, single adults are having a disability? How many single adults are in, kind of need respite care, that kind of thing. And you go from there. You have to not just say all the single adults get priority first. You have to break it down. And that's true for all the different groups that are represented. Families with children, all kinds of different situations. They have subgroups to them relating to what kind of priority they would be. So that's kind of where it's been broken down into it even more with our data. I yield.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments?
I have one more question. Along with the assessment, maybe Kate, this is a question for you. Identifying the resources that are available based on the needs, are we also then identifying and documenting the gaps so that we know what we need to work on?
Definitely. I think that there's many different ways to do that. Anecdotally, I think we could do that in this room, of course. But then also looking at, the data is so important because it helps us understand, we can break it down by many different populations and see, how many, potential options are available for those populations. So we do have a pretty good idea of what the gaps are, especially related to permanent housing or emergency shelter. And the challenge really for any, homelessness system is that it's ever changing. And that we know, people fall newly into homelessness, and then there are people who then exit homelessness for various reasons.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Catherine. And for the rest of the folks who are on the coordinated entry system committee, I know that is a weighty conversation that you guys are carrying on your shoulders, and I think we all look forward to sort of a final presentation of how you would recommend that we do this differently for obviously good reason. So thank you. Excellent. All right, so up next we have Kate on deck to give us a presentation on a very rapidly changing process around the governor's emergency declaration to homelessness.
Thank you. So you may be aware that the governor of Oregon declared an emergency declaration due to homelessness on January 10th of this year. And as soon as that occurred, communities began running to understand kind of what this means and what needs to be in place in order to be prepared for whatever may be coming down the pipeline. And so like Brittany alluded to, I feel like I learn new things every day. And so I know some of you have heard this presentation a number of times, and I can share that there's more information than you have heard previously, if you've already heard it. So if you go to the next slide, the state has decided that they are going to call this executive order all in. And so that's the verbiage that will be used moving forward, which I think is more eloquent certainly than an executive order or a declaration. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone. When you hear this term all in Lane County, this is what we're referencing. And that is the visual that I liked yesterday evening, at least. There might be new ones coming. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. So on January 10th, when the declaration was made, the governor identified kind of the vehicles to identify which regions would be supported through this declaration. The decision was that it would be continuums of care. And we have 8 continuums of care here in Oregon. In Lane County, the county region itself, as you well know, is a continuum. Other continuums of care include Central Oregon, so those 3 yellow counties in the middle. Polk and Marion County, together they are one regional continuum of care. And then separate counties of Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties have their own individual continuums of care, Jackson as well. And those 7 COCs are the ones that are included in the executive order. The green part, the dark green that you see the majority of the state is represented in, is what they call the balance of state continuum of care. And so they work with Oregon Housing Community Services. And those counties are not currently included in the governor's declaration. And so it does mean that the kind of the conversations happening right now do not include those darker green areas. There has been a procedure provided for those areas to try to kind of gain some support through the declaration. But one of the things that I think will be challenging is that the area, whatever the region is, will need to declare their own emergency due to homelessness. So that, that may be challenging for some areas. So one thing that I think is notable is that the governor or her designee will actually be the lead for the MAC group, which I'll talk more about soon, for the Tri-County Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas regional effort. And so to me, that just illustrates the seriousness that the governor has to move this declaration forward. And it also then gives other continuums of care kind of a template to watch, what are they doing and what is working well and what isn't. So the governor in the declaration identified 3 core outcomes that the identified continuums of care will be working toward. And when I say continuums of care, I really mean it regarding the region. And not necessarily like the body. The region will be working together to prevent approximately 9,000 households from becoming houseless, adding an additional 600 shelter beds, and then rehousing at least 1,200 folks from unsheltered living conditions. And so that's the state goal among those 7 regions. And then, of course, each region will be working toward moving those forward. No surprise that Homeless Management Information System will be the tool used to collect data and to help the state understand how each community is progressing toward these outcomes. And then the time period for the achievement of these outcomes is January 10th of this year to January 10th of next year. And so it's very quick. And at this point, there isn't pursuit of dollars beyond that January 10th of 2024 period, though I have no doubt that through advocacy, there will be pursuit in the future. So in the declaration, there were 2 funding amounts that were identified. The first being $40 million. And what we've learned there is it's dollars that are kind of in the bank of Oregon Housing Community Services that are going to be in reserve. And so if the $130 million that are currently being requested through the state legislature doesn't come through, either in whole or in part, then that $40 million would be used to help meet the overall funding goal. But the focus right now is on passing that $130 million ask through the state legislature. And I know there's been some news recently just about that, and the governor really pushing to have that $130 million approved in March as soon as possible. Within that ask, you have funding for prevention, which is rent assistance and supportive services, emergency shelter, rehousing, which is commonly rapid rehousing, as well as diversion assistance, and even outreach support, and then some other opportunities for tribes throughout the state, specifically for culturally responsive organizations, and then for local communities and the emergency management services that are supported. So at this point, it is, I think it's looking pretty good that these dollars will be identified, but they have not been secured at this point.
Those dollars, they will be divided on a population basis to the 7.
They will. In fact, I've got a slide to show you. Good question. It is. All right. So to respond to Dr. Willie's comment here, we met with the state on Wednesday, and the state let us know that they've developed a formula that looks at the number of people who are houseless in the community, as well as a number of American Community Survey data points. And based on that formula, Lane County is slated to receive somewhere between $19 to $22 million. And again, this is during that we're almost to a 9-month period. We are. I mean, we've got less than 9 months for these dollars. The state has indicated that these dollars may not be used to quote, supplant or supplement existing funding. And so, we're going to need to keep digging into that to really understand, where are the barriers around that requirement. And they've also indicated it is not to be braided. And so, for example, the county receives ORDAP dollars, and so we are not to kind of add these dollars to ORDAP to kind of create a cohesive program that's already running. We were also notified of the outcomes that we as a region needed to begin working toward. And as you can see regarding prevention, it's approximately 1,600 to 1,700 households are to be prevented from experiencing homelessness, to create approximately 120 emergency shelter beds in our community, and then to create approximately 230 or 40 households to move them from unsheltered homelessness to permanent housing. And so what you can see from those outcomes is that there is a real focus with this declaration on moving people out of unsheltered situations into permanent housing. And not as great of a focus by the governor on creating additional shelter beds. We know that there could be far more than the 120 shelter beds created, and they would be filled. However, these are the goals that we've been asked to pursue. I also understand that there is an opportunity for flexibility, and the state would consider, whether they would be okay with that. Yes.
On a yearly basis, how many do we currently prevent and how many do we currently rehouse?
Yeah, great question. So I checked in with our rent assistance program, and during the height of the Treasury money that was coming in for rent assistance, they supported over 4,000 households with it was over $20 million. And so I appreciated hearing that because I thought, okay, that's doable as far as this outcome itself. Regarding emergency shelter, I heard yesterday that the city of Eugene has already created nearly 250 emergency shelter beds, and you may know.
Well, we have a total of close to 700 emergency shelter, but we created about 250 of the safe sleeping sites. So we have about 5 of those now.
Great, thank you. So you can see that too is a doable number. The rehousing from unsheltered homelessness to permanent housing, that will be a challenge. As a community, we are challenged with rehousing, particularly single adults. From the street into permanent housing. And what I hear most often from the providers is just the lack of affordable housing, the fact that the folks that they're working with don't have ample income to meet, 3 or 4 times the rent. And then if someone has, engagement in criminal justice, that just makes it even more challenging. And so that will be a consideration when we're working on creating the overall plan to propose to the state is the challenge that we have with rehousing.
Is it when I'm understanding that the ideal is that you're rehousing into permanent supportive housing or permanent housing? Is there any latitude in here with some of our traditional things? Would Square One Village count as housing?
You know, the key is that it be permanent. So the individual would need to hold the lease. And so while I'm glad to look at the option, I'm not sure that that is the structure.
And does it have to, does the prioritization of those individuals being rehoused have to follow our normal coordinated entry? I know we're getting away from that assessment, but, or is it, the reason I'm asking is there's other innovative programs out there like the home share program where an individual is actually getting their own lease, and is that something we could pursue knowing that that's not necessarily through the coordinated entry system, but it could be a way to help increase that number? I don't know.
Yeah, I appreciate that question because I do think you're onto something. Yeah. Another example is the diversion program that coordinated entry facilitates, and that is really focused on people who are newly homeless. And so those are other ways to meet this outcome without formal rapid rehousing being provided. And I think we would want to be creative. And I can say that the state is encouraging us to do just that.
Do we have any, like, it's been changing every day. When do they stop moving the bar? And what as a CCO, or sorry, a COC, that's been identified, when are we able to, like, understand those thresholds? If there is some flexibility, is there a percentage? So if we have help more emergency shelter beds, but we can help fewer prevention and we do more rehousing, is there a benchmark that we can actually like see if we were successful, can we do more?
So the next step, and we'll talk about this further in a few slides, is to create a community plan. And that community plan, the lead for that development is the MAC group, which stands for Multi-Agency Coordinating Group. And it was one that the state required that each continuum of care region create. And then the state has provided a coordinating community plan template that the MAC group needs to work on. And I'll share more about how that looks.
Can we scroll? We can't see all the chat there. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. We can keep going.
Okay. Next slide. All right, so here's the visual that was provided by the state of Oregon to Lane County. And it shows the structure that is being put together, where the executive office, of course, is the governor's. And then you have agencies at the state level, Oregon Housing Community Services, as well as Oregon Department of Emergency Management working together. This is very unique in my experience for Oregon Department of Emergency Management to be working with Housing and Community Services. What we have seen across the country is that type of collaboration where it really elevates the focus of homelessness and really does move it to an emergency situation where often an emergency operations center is set up, and the progress toward outcomes and identification of, the number of people and the ways that people are being supported is at the front and center on a daily or weekly basis through that emergency operations center. And so myself and Lane County's emergency operation manager, Patience Winningham Melcher, and I have begun talking about what would our local emergency operations center look like, and how do we really elevate the conversation so it's happening on a regular basis. And a model that would be very effective to use is Built for Zero, which Catherine referenced in her presentation. And the idea with Built for Zero is really just looking at an individual and identifying what do they need and how do we move them forward. And it's also been done, especially in the Seattle area, with focusing very clearly on specific encampments. and putting, a great deal of effort toward one encampment so that folks move on to emergency shelter and or permanent housing. And we know that we've seen that model already in our community, but this would be a way to ramp it up kind of at an even greater level and on a regional basis. And so that will be a part of the plan that's being created to be put forth to the state for their consideration. So each region needs to create this MAC group, and the lead agency for that is Lane County, and the suggested partners for that MAC group include emergency management, the continuum of care, local homelessness agencies, shelter providers, rapid rehousing providers, non-governmental organizations, and then Homes for Good. And so there's been a group that's been pulled together. The individuals on it really are focused on those who do the work already in the community. And that was something that the state has been very clear about as well. There's some questions about, should it be a group of elected officials or, should it be a group of community members? And they said, we really think the most effective way to move the MAC group forward would be people who do the work each and every day. Go on to the next slide. So, through many conversations, this structure has been pieced together for Lane County, and you have the MAC group there, again, as that lead entity. And the MAC group's focus initially will be putting together the community plan that's been requested from the state, but also doing it with feedback from a number of different bodies. One are the purple entities, which are bodies that include people with lived expertise, include our Youth Advisory Committee for the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. We have a case management program in the county who is already starting to talk to people who are houseless currently regarding what are the needs within emergency shelter and rehousing, and then also League. And so we'll be receiving feedback from those entities, synthesizing, and then providing to the MAC group to consider. We'll also be creating task groups. And this is an opportunity if someone isn't involved in the MAC group for whatever reason, the task groups really are the places where, whomever is interested is welcome to plug in. And we'll have 3 task groups focus on each of the outcomes set forth by the governor. And so I'll actually share when those meetings are so folks can mark their calendar. And then the Poverty and Homelessness Board will play a really important role in this overall structure as the policy group. And as you know, you indeed are the policy group for the continuum of care itself. And so it's a very good fit. And we know that there will be some systemic changes that need to happen as a result of kind of this large amount of money coming in and the immediacy that comes with those dollars. So you can actually go to the next slide.
Richard, I see your hand up. We're going to let her get to the end, and then we'll come back around to you.
So for example, likely there'll be some changes related to coordinated entry, to the outreach programs in the community, to rehousing programs, prevention, and emergency shelter. And what they'll likely focus on is just the overall coordination collectively. Because we really want to make sure that the programs, whether they're existing today or they're going to be created as a result of these additional dollars, that they're all working in tandem collectively together. And so, for example, the lateral transfer policy that was passed today is a great example of a policy that will, want to create something similar, even with outreach, for example. What are the things that outreach teams are doing to help, bring people into the system? And do we have a formal policy around that? And I I don't think we do at this point, do we? No. Okay. So there's an opportunity there. And so that will be the key role of the PHB. And I highly encourage all of you, if you have the time and interest, to get involved with the task group if you're not already on the MAC group, because that will also give you opportunities to provide feedback. Next slide. So this is another slide from the state, just synthesizing what the community planning will require. And it does look for a gaps analysis. So Cindy will be doing that as a part of that planning. And we'll also want to make sure that we're sharing information regarding partnerships and then capacity for new or strengthened partnerships. We'll be identifying the outcomes that we see as a community will be able to achieve. And so that's where, we can say we're hearing we need to provide, 111 shelter beds. How about 150? And then the state, will come back. And then, of course, we need to strategize for implementation, because as soon as the dollars start pouring in, we're going to have to start running because time is ticking. We are fortunate in that the state has arranged for technical assistance to be available through a technical assistance provider called ICH, and they are kind of well known within the homelessness world as just knowing the discipline and really having folks who have on the ground experience. And so we have the opportunity to ask for what we need. And I know that they really hit home. If your community doesn't have capacity to do X, Y, and Z, ask for technical assistance and we'll work to help you with that. And for us, that will be a significant need because we won't, for example, have an opportunity to bring on, another me or another one of our, amazing staff members. And so we're just working within the amount of staff members that we have right now. So here is the timeline given to us by the state. We have until tomorrow to provide the MAC group names. And so I've been working on that. And if you got an email from me, I'll need your name by today, please. On March 10th, the community plan is due to the state. And so that now is less than a month. The state intends to approve the plans within a week and let the communities know. And then they expect to provide funding soon thereafter. Right now, the usual procurement processes that you're used to with Lane County, if you are a contractor, are in place for these dollars. There is an opportunity for any jurisdiction to declare an emergency due to homelessness. And that emergency does then flex policies within the jurisdiction that might allow for things to move more swiftly. I will share that there are discussions happening within Lane County, but I'm not clear on that decision, and I don't expect a decision until closer to the community plan actually being approved by the state. But that will also kind of help determine how quickly we can move with the dollars and what the process to allocate the dollars to agencies will look like. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of having flashbacks of our YHDP process and how intensely time-consuming that was to make sure that Homeless Voice was part of driving those policies and the importance of that. I think in order to get the funds, to get the support, to get the voices at the table that should be there developing these plans, we probably do need to move things quicker, because we won't have 2 months to come back here and present to the PHB for approval, and you won't have those regular processes that we kind of lived in between those with our 4-month window of developing the YHDP, but it was still, we had 48 hours of trainings and groups with everybody at the table and people listening. I just don't know. March 10th, scary. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I agree. I mean, I think that the fact is that we've been able, we've known about this timeline now for almost 3 weeks. And so we have been able to start the wheels rolling, especially with kind of the lived expertise groups. We have a MAC meeting scheduled for next week, and then 2 future ones after that. And I think that the key is to our goal will be just continuing to share the document and then to continue to get feedback regarding the plan. I will share that because the oversight for the plan is Lane County, it will be the commissioners, is what I understand, who will kind of okay it and then it can move up because it's a request for dollars. The reason that the Poverty and Homelessness Board won't be voting officially on it is because it's the MAC group that is the kind of the advisory body for that. That being said, as soon as we have a draft, I do intend to send it out to folks to be able to provide feedback. And it'll be a tight turnaround.
So do you know how many slides you have left? I just want to let you get through the presentation and then take questions from there. Yeah.
Sure. So this is just the focus from the state perspective. They shared what their intentions are within these phases. And so just to pick out, continuous quality improvement is a big one. And so that means for the providers, accurate and timely HMIS data entry is going to be imperative. Continually looking at, what's working well and what isn't working well and what changes need to be made is a commitment of the state, which I certainly appreciate. I think that they're willing to be flexible as they work with the community. And then, we'll continue to go right up until December with providing technical assistance and, really understanding what progress toward the outcomes are being made. Go ahead. So just to recognize there are things we do not know yet, and that includes, what are the funding requirements? What is the admin? I will share right now that I've been told the budget admin is 15%. And so if you are used to working with the county, the county usually splits admin. And so, already we don't have enough admin. And I have been told that we can request more through the plan, and so that's an intention, to the point of, needing at least 10%. So that would be a part of the ask of 20%, really, for the county to be able to cover their costs, and then the agency to be able to get 10% admin. And then, not sure on specific definitions, especially of emergency shelter and what it means to rehouse someone. And then, what type of technical assistance we'll get. We may ask for something, but not necessarily receive it. Next slide. So I mentioned those task groups. The focus of those will be initial brainstorming and planning around the specific interventions. What do we need related to prevention assistance? What population should we be focusing on? Do we need additional, supportive services, et cetera? And then after the plan has been accepted, then the task groups will progress identified action steps that have been given to them through the MAC group itself. And so really looking at, what are key things that need to be accomplished, and these task groups would then go and do that. And then once completed, they would be looking for more work. So please, if you're interested, there are the meeting dates and times. I know that staff are going to be sending out invites to particularly providers who might fit into those intervention categories. But if you're interested in attending, feel free to send an email to the staff member identified. And we'll send out this entire PowerPoint by tomorrow morning at the latest to everyone.
Okay, excellent. I think there's a lot of questions. I want to have Richard first because he's been waiting, and then Chris and Mayor Venice. And then if there's somebody else who want to get in the queue, just wave at me. Richard, if you're still there.
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to have note that it should be taken into consideration when doing this. The overall idea behind this is to get our homeless population down and housed. But there are many people that are in the homeless community, and I am a lived experience person, so I must represent that idea. There are many in the community of the homeless that have been ignored and left to die for so long that they've been left to their own devices, and they're fine now. They don't want to have anything to do with any of their programs. There's a group of people over the Amazon Park area, maybe up to 2,500 people spread out throughout that area that don't even participate in any of the services that Eugene or Springfield offers. No dining room, no Highway 99, no nothing. They are on their own, and many of them would rather remain that way. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, real quickly, I don't know how this is going to be taken by the general community. I assume that Brittany's going to spill the beans of some of this to the chamber, but are they going to have a say-so in all of this, the general populace? Because then we run up to the same obstacles that we do, and I don't think that they should be eliminated from the conversation. But if we're trying to do this rapidly, what is the general populace going to get to and have to say about this?
Thanks, Richard. I appreciate your comment. I will welcome, whomever is interested to the task groups. And that was one of the focus areas of having the task groups, is just a place where people, might be interested, who might want to dig in a little further regarding a particular type of intervention to join those groups.
All right, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is really tight timeline. There's a lot of stuff here, and I'm very supportive of us doing something as a state. I guess my question is, what good does it do for us to have a January 10th date to start if we don't even get to do anything till April? Is there ways that organizations involved in this process are be able to recoup costs for attending some of these meetings or supports? Or is it just for staffing on the state level that the January 10th matters?
I appreciate your question and would be glad to dig into that further.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mayor Venice.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I really appreciated your presentation, Kate. I just wanted to note that you did not mention the city of Eugene being part of this, and they're not on your chart. And the city of Eugene does have a seat at the table, and we have members that are sitting on the MAC, and that we have been, over the last couple of years, the primary provider of shelter services. So our role in this is an important one. I think it belongs on the chart, but I certainly wanted the Poverty and Homelessness Board to know that we're integral to this, and that we do have, as grateful as we are for this, we have some concerns because we did establish 250 safe sleep sites in the last 18 months or so, and we don't have past ARPA funds support for that. So it will be challenging to create 125 new shelter beds without some assurance that there's ongoing support. We don't have the support really to keep going what we've got. So I do think there's a misstep in the governor's plan here that is a serious source of concern. I mean, I'm part of a group of Oregon mayors, and we all have this concern. So just putting that out there. And I am a little confused about the deadline vis-a-vis with respect to the legislative process, because we're meeting this deadline and we're saying we're going to have funds by March, but actually the legislature hasn't weighed in on 130 million yet.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late. I had a work thing that went way over. Really great information. I guess the two things that I see that I would be interested in as this gets kicked off is, one of them is just simply that we look at the models that we've been using the last couple of years and look for something that, mature it, change it, specialize it, any term that you want to use, but just kind of look at like as we're doing this work, look for a different way, that's a little bit more flexible. So the other thought, and I think Mayor Venice brings up a really good point, which is, from a position perspective, we really do need ongoing funding for the services. And then lastly, I just want to end with a third thought. New governor comes in, top priority in the state, a lot of emphasis on this, but it is possible. I keep thinking of slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? It is, if there's a lot of resources flying down at us, it would be very easy to sort of waste the time and energy, and we've got to move at the right pace. And whatever that is, I'm just hoping the county hears me on that, to make sure that we don't run at this thing so fast that we aren't as effective as we could be.
So sorry, I'm gonna throw myself in the queue, and then I have Mike and Susan there. My question is about the 3 different priorities and the funding. Is it attached specifically to each of those? Maybe this is sort of what Chris's question was earlier. Could we as a community say, we want to lean into the prevention and the rehousing? We're going to we're not going to ask for funds around shelter, but we're going to ask for more around the other 2, or, vice versa. I have no idea does that make sense? Or does it have to, in order to get the funding, do we have to hit all of those targets?
I do understand that in order to receive funding, we're going to need to hit all the targets. Where I understand the flexibility is that we could say, we're just going to focus on 50 shelter beds and then add to the rehousing outcomes and say, we're going to, provide 300 households instead. And so I don't understand that there could be, just completely taking out one of the outcomes, but that there is flexibility. And then, of course, we'll submit that in our plan, and then the state will approve or come back. And
I just know the safe sleep sites, it took months to get them stood up, and that was before they even let a person in, right? So if we're talking about, maybe it's just adding capacity to each of those, and that is a little faster, but
they're saying you can't add capacity to existing programs. They have to be new. That's the challenge.
So there's not a chance if we have a safe sleep site that has 100 that we could say we'll add 20 more to that site?
I think that that's possible. I think that, and I know the verbiage is difficult because usually you can't. But I do think we could add capacity. But what we couldn't do is, pay for a greater percentage. Yeah, if it were just 20 beds, then we could just provide, 20% more supportive services.
Okay, Councilor Flake and then Susan.
Yeah, I want to echo both of the mayor's comments about the ongoing funding and also about the continuing existing funds. Cottage Grove, as an example, opened a low barrier shelter with ARPA funds, which will be gone in 2 years. So, by saying that we cannot continue an existing program will effectively end that program. And that's the other part I'd like to do, is that we need to also look at rural communities as well. I know, and I'm very grateful for what Eugene and the metro area are doing, but we also now under, House Bill 3115 and the judicial actions are required to these. So now every city in the state is a stakeholder in this. And the one thing I will say, and I do agree in some sense with, the other mayor's comments, but we also have hired, and I'm going from my agency hat now, we've hired a whole bunch of additional temporary employees to do housing assistance that are now trained and experienced, and I will be letting go as soon as the stimulus money's gone, that if we're not fast enough, I'm going to end up having to retrain new folks. So there's also, the loss of, some skill sets if we don't act quickly. So I just wanted to offer that perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, Susan?
Yeah, so sorry to jump in the middle with my panic over the timeline, but also kind of to go back to that, I guess my primary concern is that sort of what Mayor Van Gordon was talking about, in that if we push too quickly, if our primary goal is to get something on paper, then doing the services and providing the supports that we all know about, that we all understand, is going to be the easiest, fastest way to get that done. But then we sit in a spot where we're doing what we've always done, which led us to this crisis, which is then going to, end. So the ability to take a minute and step out and have those conversations with folks with lived experience and have someone, the technical assistants probably guide folks through that conversation of the sky's the limit, here's a budget, here's our goal, how do we get there and have a sustainable system? What are some different ways to think about this than what we've always done as a system of government or multiple non-governmental agencies? And what's the best way to move forward? I really feel like that kind of a process, it's really time consuming, but it's super critically important for this.
Can I just comment on that too? I think it's really important to recognize these are emergency funds. So the governor also has a budget around housing and homelessness, right? So that longer term piece. So they're two different buckets. So.
And I appreciate your point, and that also is important to my team as well. And so the purpose for the first task group meeting is to really like wave that magic wand and think big, like what ideas exist. And I will give props to the state regarding their plan template for this, is that they really looked at like what are the best practices related to these interventions across the country and even in the world, and we have an opportunity to kind of weigh in, like, do we want to give this a try? What do we think? And so one example is to create a coordinated outreach approach. And that's something that very much is a big best practice that we just haven't had an opportunity to facilitate. But there are many other examples where it's like, I don't know that we've talked about that locally, so let's think about whether we want to continue to do that.
Chris, and then just looking at the time, probably have to wrap up after that.
Just a quick, if we are advising and helping support multi-jurisdictions in this process, let's maybe look at, as we participate in the task groups and the MAC groups, look at ways that we can fund or utilize monies in a way that we haven't. Is Net 30 where it's at? Is having the providers hold the money first and then being reimbursed to where it's at? How do we actually get engagement so that way we don't have to do extra administrative work, but actually do what we do best, which is serve the needs? As a community, all of us are trying to work together with how we are, and they're asking us to possibly even reinvent the wheel as quickly as we need to. So we ask our governor partners and government partners to do the same. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't see any hands raised over there on the chat or on the Zoom, so hopefully we can capture those comments in the chat. Appreciate, Kate, the update. And so you'll be sending out the presentation tomorrow. I know that the Poverty and Homelessness Board doesn't have a role on the MAC group, but is there a way for us to get more regular updates? Because we won't meet again until after this whole thing is said and done and up to the state. And I feel like there's some of us, like specifically not being a provider, I don't have an outlet for updates. So I would love if we could get even just email updates on how those processes are going.
Yes, I hear the ask, and I will also say that Commissioner Farr, as a member of the chair's group, has been identified to serve as the liaison between the MAC group and the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And so I'll chat with him to see what vehicle he thinks would be the best way to get the PHB information. And so you might be getting an update from myself or maybe him.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Our next meeting, March 16th is the Executive Committee, and then April 20th is the next all-member meeting. I appreciate everybody's attendance and getting some of these important policies passed. If you haven't seen it yet, in your board packet, there is an update from staff on various different topics that they included this time around, as well as some comments on the strategic plan. So our hope is that in an upcoming meeting, we can dive a little bit more into that strategic plan and get some progress updates. So any questions or concerns? Send them to Kate, not me. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you.